Shalom, shalom. I'm gonna start off by giving honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, BAHASHAM, YAHWASHI, QADASH. Double honors to the elders and apostles of great wisdom for teaching me this truth and sincerity. Salutation to the hopeful elect that spread throughout the four corners of the earth. All right, so this is gonna be a two-part lesson over the book of Genesis, and particularly is going to go in the third chapter, because in the third chapter it explains how our nation, particularly our nation, the Israelites, how we, how wickedness started, basically, how, and you can, because in Christian, the third chapter is, the book of Genesis is controversial because some people do not understand the meaning of it because, they are not taught, they don't have the truth. Um, the churches that they go to don't have the truth of, the Genesis third chapter. So I'm gonna speak on it, and we're gonna, see what the Spirit take us. But I hope this lesson will be edifying. All right. So I'm gonna dive right into it with Genesis third chapter, verse 1, and it reads, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which YAHWAH the Most High had made. And he said unto the woman, Yeah, has the Most High said, Ye should not eat of every tree of the garden." Right. So the serpent, you know, represents Esau, right? Um, represents the wicked. Um, he was subtle, right? He was slick. He was sly by, when he approached the woman, when he approached Eve in the garden, right? Um, and continue reading. And he said unto the woman, Yeah, have the Most High said, Ye should not eat of every tree of the field. Right. That means, that the Adamites, which can represent Israel, they were not supposed, because they only knew good, right? They wasn't supposed to, go into, mingle amongst other nations, right? And take up other nations, right? Which the tree mean the nation, which can represent the nations, and the serpents. And I'm going to, the serpents, and we did not park before, because the serpent, we can compare the serpent um, into the present. Revelations, Revelation 12, like 9. Revelation 12, chapter 12, verse 9, it reads, And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Right. So the serpent is not, referring to a snake. You know, that's just the serpent is a simple symbol of, the Esau, right? It was the serpent that was in the garden. He was brown. He was brown, right? Um, the serpent is not there to talk about a snake, and that's what most people think in their head. They think that the serpent in Genesis 3rd chapter verse 1 talking about a snake, which is not talking about a actually human being, right? A brown skinned person. And when you go in the meaning of the serpent, there's meaning to it, subtitle, right? Subtitle. Subtitle, crafty, sly, prudent, all those. All right, and I'm going to shoot some more. Revelation 12 and 9, Revelation 20. Revelation chapter 20, verse 1, it reads, And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and the great chain in his hand. Right, so the angel, which represents Septimus Ceruvius, um, which he was a roughly 193 AD. He was a African American Roman. He was an African American. He was a black, or so-called black person. That he was a emperor, right? And his name, which Septimus means seventh, right? Represent that he's the color of the seven. Seven will represent Esau. The seven being Esau power structure, beginning with the Greeks and Romans. All right. Then the bottomless pit, which represent Europe, and the great chain in his hand, which represents slavery. And because back in those times, the Israelites, they were beginning, to rule. They were ruling Europe, as I'm about to read and more to prove it. Revelation chapter 20, verse 2, and it reads, And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Again, going back to the serpent, which represents Esau, right? And 1,000 years, the Israelite put, the so-called Esau, the so-called white person, into slavery for 1,000 years. And which, as you read more, it's gonna represent the third chapter. I'm not gonna read it right now, but it just represent, um, after those 1,000 years, after those 1,000 years are fulfilled, Esau will eventually come back into rulership through iconoclasm, and and the Renaissance, right? As I did on my iconoclasm video, right? That that, and he'll be loose for a little season, which represents that this present time that he'll be able to rule and able to do all manner of wickedness, right? Which he's doing right now. All right. Then I'm gonna get Psalms the 58b. Psalms 58. We get Revelation 20, the 7th chapter. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loose out of his prison, right? So after the 1,000 years are expired, the Edomite will come back into rulership, and they will be able to deceive the whole world, which can represent that how the serpent, which is Esau, he deceived Eve. He was able to deceive Eve. Psalms the 58th chapter. I'm just going through some precepts that can that line up with the scriptures that you can better understand it. Psalms 58 wicked are estranged with the womb, they go astray as soon as they're born, speaking lies. Their poison, which are the poison represent their philosophies. Their poison is like the poison of a serpent. They are like the deaf adder that stoppeth her ear. Right. So you know, Esau was born to do wickedness, right? As it reads. Um, their poison, their philosophies, which again, you got a serpent. Their serpent is talking about Esau, right? Not a snake that move around, right? Not a snake with legs. Talking about a human, right? And going back to Genesis 3rd chapter, verse 1, it reads, "And he said unto the woman, Yeah, have the Most High said, Ye should not eat of every tree of the garden." The tree represents the other nations. Um, and there's scriptures that you know refer to as nation as trees or people as trees. And I'm gonna get it here in Ecclesiastes 3, 3rd chapter. And it reads, "I said in my heart concerning the estate of the sons of man," right? Because back in the old time, in Adam and Eve time, there was three kinds of people. The son of man would represent the other nation. The son of the wicked would represent, Esau, and the sons of God would represent the Israelites. That the Most High might manifest them, and they that might see them, that they themselves are beasts, right? So that the other nation, they were like, they were the other nation, they were wicked, right? They didn't, um, they didn't live by, the YAHWAH commandments, right, or laws. They live like beasts, right? I'm gonna get Psalms the 49th chapter. Psalms 49th chapter, verse 20. Psalms 49th chapter, verse 20 reads, "Man that is honored and understanding not is like the beasts that perish," right? So again, going back to the other nation, you know, they understand it not. They don't understand the laws, right? They're like beasts, and they perish, right? Psalms 32nd chapter, verse 9. Psalms 32nd chapter, verse 9 reads, "Be ye, be ye not as a horse, be ye not as a horse or as a mule, which have no understanding, whose mouth must be held in with a bit and bridle, lest they come near unto thee." Right. So it can represent, don't be like the other nations, right? That don't have the understanding, right, of the laws. You know, they don't understand. They worship other gods, right? They eat whatever, right? And the other nation back then was the Japhites. It was the Japanites, um, and the Moabites, and all them nations. And the Hamites, pretty sure Hamites. So don't be like horses or like mules that don't have understand. Don't be like those other nations, right? Um, and again, it can represent when Eve bit the apple, they fled into the trees, so it can represent them, which can represent here Psalms 106 verse 35. But were mingled among the heathen and learned their works, right? Um, it can represent Israel being learning the ways of the learning the ways of the heathen, right? Being mixed with their philosophies, doing the customs of the heathen, right? Um, Looking to represent now because you have some of our people that is like in those nations, right? Those other nations, right? And I'm going to move on from here to back to Genesis third chapter. Genesis third chapter verse 2, and it reads, "And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden." Right? Give that serpent represent Esau, who was brown skinned, but Genesis third chapter verse 3, and it reads, "But the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the Most High has said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." Right? The fruit doesn't make you wise. Fruit does not make you wise. So that's talking about the philosophies again, going back to the philosophies, which those trees represent. Those trees in the midst of the garden represent going back to other nations, right? Because when they eat that fruit, they will know, when they take out the other philosophies, they will take up other customs, right? I'm gonna get Ezekiel. Fine, you bear with me. Ezekiel. Chapter 31, verse 6, and it reads, all the fowls of the heaven made their nests, and his boughs and vendor, his branches did all the beasts of the field bring forth their young, and under his shadow dwelt all great nations. Right. So the branches, so which can represent, Israel, right? Bear with me. Again, which comparing, the the branches will represent the other nations, but the branches can also represent, um, the family line, right? Again, and continue read the seventh chapter, the seventh verse. Thus was he fair in his greatness, and the length of his branches, for his root was by great waters, right? So the length of his branches represent Adam's offspring, right? And the great voices can represent great waters represent, the Most High Yahweh. And continue reading the Ezekiel, the 31st chapter, verse 8, and it reads, the cedars in the garden of the Most High could not hide him. The the fir trees were not like his boughs, and the chest and the chestnut trees were not like his branches. Not any tree in the garden of the Most High was like unto him in his beauty. Right. The cedars in the garden of the Most High could not hide him, which represent Adam could not hide himself among the heathens. Right. Um, the fir trees were not like his boughs, right, which represent the heathen nation are not like Israel. So the heathen nation, they live their own ways. They live how they wanted to live. Basically, they didn't live by any commandments or laws. And Adam, he was trying to hide himself with those other heathen, the other heathen nations, right? Going back to Psalms 106:35, when we were trying to mingle with other nations, right? Ezekiel 31 verse 9 reads, I have made him fair by the multitude of his branches, so that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of the Most High envied him, right? So that means that, you know, which can represent the multitude of his branches, which can represent, you know, Adam offspring, the Israelites, and the trees which represent the other nation of Eden, um, which represent the other nations, right? Again, that were in the garden, the other nation envy, the Israelites, right? Uh, which now because when we go to other nations, they look at us funny, right? They have that same mindset of that we come there to like steal or do whatever, so that it can represent the other nation envy the Israelites. Uh, I'll get Mark 8, Mark 8, chapter verse 23. Mark 8, the chapter verse 23, and reads, and he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hand upon him, he asked him if he saw out, right? Continue reading 24 verse. And he looked up and said, I see man as the trees walking, right? Again, comparing that, going back to Genesis 3rd chapter verse 3, comparing that the trees represent, can represent nations or peoples, right? So the trees, which are the midst of the garden, represent the other nations. Going down to Genesis, the 3rd chapter, verse 4, and it reads, and the serpent said unto the woman, ye should not surely die. Right. So the serpent was like, if you eat this fruit, you won't die. You won't die immediately, basically. That was, Esau said. He was trying to convince the serpent by using ethos, right, emotions, that um, the serpent was trying to convince Eve, the serpent was trying to convince Eve by using ethos, right, emotion, that if you eat this fruit, basically, if you take part in this philosophy, live how you want to live, you can do this, you can do that, without a care in the world, you won't die. But I got a precept that goes with that because this is what they do. Is how you know Esau is very cunning in what he does. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 11 and read 8 chapter 8 verse 11 reads, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, right? So, when the serpent, when Esau told Eve she would not, she should not surely die, can represent, that she won't die immediately, but sin sin will lead to death, right? But it's just not gonna happen immediately, right? But when she does, when she, eventually when she did eat the apple, guess what happened? Immediately came sin, right? And death. Continue reading. Therefore, the heart of the sons of man is fully set in them to do evil, right? So the sons of man of the other nations, they would do evil, right? It is in their heart to do evil, right? All right. Um, when you continue reading down, it talks about how that you will eventually get judged by your when you commit sin. All right. So Genesis 3rd chapter verse 4, and the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. Right. She will not surely die, but we know what that leads to. Genesis 3rd chapter verse 5, and it reads, for the Most High doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Right. So, um, they'll be open, right? Their mind will be open to, these new these new philosophies, these new religions, and this new way of life, the new way of living, right? And they should be as gods, right? They'll be able to. You should be as gods, know good or evil, right? They will know what happened when you do good, what happened when you do bad, and there'll be the judgment, and the judgment that will come when you do evil, right? I'm get second. That's on is the second chapter. Second Thessalonians chapter second. The chapter second. So I give it. That's the Second Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4. Who opposes and exalted himself above all that is called the Most High, or that is worshipped, so that he, as the Most High, sitting in the temple of the Most High, showing himself that he is the Most High, right? So Esau, you know, he trying to be like, YAHWAH, he trying to, you know, and which he do have some knowledge, which is on the left hand, right? The wicked, he has some knowledge of how to do wickedness, right? Which was given by Yahweh Bashem Shah. But he has some knowledge of wickedness, right? And which he was trying to give, Adam Eve. 'Cause Adam and Eve, they only knew good at the time. They only knew how to live by, the Most High laws and commandments, right? Um, so the serpent, Esau, he was trying to come to Eve, and trying to give them the left side, or the knowledge of wickedness, right? Um, their eyes should be open, which represents their mind will be open to the new philosophies, the new way of life, the new way of living. Um, and Esau, he try to be like the Most High, right? Continue reading Genesis 3rd chapter verse 6. And when the woman saw that, and the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, right? And a tree to be desired to make one wise, right? The she will eventually, they will learn wickedness, and she took of the fruit thereof and did eat. Again, she was she was deceived by by the serpent, and she she took in the philosophies, right, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So through the serpent, through the by the serpent through the woman, Adam eventually ate it, and he also took into the he also he that also opened his mind. He took in the philosophies, right? Um, and I got a precept to go with that too. Um, one Timothy, one Timothy, one Timothy chapter 2, verse 14. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14 reads, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression, right? But, you know, by the woman, right? By Eve, right? Who, Eve, she was already transgressing, right? She wasn't supposed to, speak to a man, Esau, without her husband being present anyway. So, she was already out of order, right? She was supposed to have Adam, or Adam was supposed to be the one that was supposed to be speaking with the man, not Eve. But um, but again, going back to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in transgression, right? So Eve, which was deceived because they want to live life, right? They want to live a pleasant life, right? They want to they don't have the minds. They don't have the minds of a man. They don't have keeping the laws. They need to be in order at all times. And which why Esau went to the woman and I went to the which is why Esau went to the woman and he didn't go to the man, right? Because he knew that if he went to the man was going to immediately shut that down and not take up anything or not even listen to even entertain what he is saying, right? So the woman being deceived, you know, the woman being deceived wasn't the transgression, right? Um, I'm going to I got one more Galatians, Galatians chapter 2, verse 8. Galatians chapter 2, verse 8, and it reads, be aware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and the vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the, I'm pretty sure that says, pretty sure that I don't want to read that wrong. After the rudiments, right, of the world and not after Hamashiach, right? So that what the serpent did, right? She did. The serpent deceived Eve and Adam by vain deceit, right? They were deceived by vain deceit, right? Again, the serpent used ethos emotion to deceive Adam, which which the serpent used ethos to deceive Edom. That this and the Edom, I mean, to deceive Eve. The serpent used ethos to deceive Eve, but it deceived Adam. So the serpent used a vain deceit, right? Was cunning. He was cunning, right? What he did. Um, continue reading Genesis, the third chapter, verse 7 reads, the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked, right? So their minds were open, right? They knew they were naked, which means that they knew, that they were going off, basically. Basically, they knew that they were, sinning, right? And they sewed fig trees together and made themselves apron, right? Which can represent they took up the customs of the other nations, right? Um, then they took up the other nation. They took up the customs of the other nation that was, around. And I'm gonna have a precept with that too, because all of this, like, yeah, that's right. Yes, right. Fuck, bear with me. Okay, so like, yeah, I don't know. It's not here, right? It's on it. Second edge is 430. Here you go. This was the one I was trying to get. I guess I wrote down the wrong precept. All right, second Esdras, the chapter 4, verse 13 reads, for the grain of evil seed has been sown in the heart of Adam from the beginning. Right. So, so going back to Genesis, the third chapter, verse 7, when they, in the eyes of them both were open, they knew they were naked. Right. So they knew that they had sinned, they had took up the customs of the heathen, right? From the beginning, right? And how much ungodliness has it brought up unto this time, and how much shall it yet be bringing forth until the time of duration coming, right? So going back to how you know how how we're still in this state because of our forefather, right? How we're still in this sinful body, right? Continue reading Genesis third chapter verse 8. And they heard the voice of YAHWAH, the Most High, walking in the garden of the cool of the day. So the voice of YAHWAH is talking about the prophets, right? Because the voice do not walk. Voice does not walk. So that was YAHWAH prophets, right? That were, and I'm gonna get Hosea chapter 12 verse 10. Hosea chapter 12. Hosea chapter 12, verse 10, it reads, I have also spoken by the prophets, and I have multiplied visions, and was similitudes by the ministries of the prophets, right? Uh, right, so so the Yahweh he speak by his prophets, right? I have also spoken by the prophets, and I have multiplied vision and used similitudes by the ministry of the prophets, right? So, there's, you know, the Most High, Yahweh Shai, do not change, right? So he speaks through his prophets, right? Um, that's like during the time of Adam and Eve, right? There were prophets on the scene back then. All right. Yeah. To back that up, Jeremiah, the Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 21. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 21, and it reads, How long shall I see the standard and hear the sound of the trumpet, right? So, we're presenting prophets preaching the word, right? Um, all right. So again, going back to the voice, the sound of the trumpets is the prophets prophesizing, teaching. All right, Luke chapter 1, verse 70. Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1, verse 70, and it reads, He spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, right? So again, going back to Genesis, the third chapter, Verse 8, the voice of YAHWASHI, the Most High, walking in the garden on the cool of the day, which represent, the prophets um, that were there. He's because the Most High speaking through his prophets, right? And the prophets they were preaching during that time, right? And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Shah the Most High amongst the trees of the garden, right? So, um, the trees of the garden which represent the other nations. So the Adam and Eve, they went and mingled with the other nations, right? And the cool of the day represent before the destruction, right? Before the destruction, before the we had to eat, before we had to go you know kill animals, right? Before we had to do all the other stuff, to survive. And the cool of the day can also represent present time, the time of Jacob trouble, right? So the trees of the Garden of Nations represent the other nations, right? I'm gonna get Ezekiel chapter 31, verse 5. Therefore his height was exalted above all the trees of the field, and his boughs were multiplied, and his branches became long because of his multitude of waters when he shot forth. So the Adamites, we were above all other nations, right? And our boughs, which our boughs were multiplied and branches became long, right? Our all the Adam offspring multiply, right? And but his boughs weren't multiplied, which represent, which was a commandment for the Most High, Yahweh Shah, would be fruitful and multiply, right? And the branches can represent the family line of Adam. Psalms 1, we get Psalms chapter 1, verse 3. Psalms chapter 1, verse 3, and it reads, and he shall be like a rivers of water, and that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he do shall prosper. Right. So the rivers of water represent the truth, right? Which represent, I'm gonna get Mark the 8th chapter. Mark the 8th chapter, verse 22nd, it reads, and he commanded to Bathsheba, and they bring a blind man to him. He be I believe I read this. Slovakia. I don't know why I got this written down twice. But they're going back into the how the trees represent the nations. So 3, the 8th chapter, Genesis chapter 3, verse 9, and Yahweh shall the Most High call unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? Verse 10, and he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and hid myself. So Adam knew that he had sinned, right? The prophets made him naked, right? So the prophets, they basically told Adam that he had sinned, right? Verse 11, reads, and he said, Who told thee that was naked? The prophets, hast thou eaten of the tree wherefore I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat, right? Verse 12 reads, and the man said, The woman whom thou gavest to me was me. She gave me of the tree, and I did eat. So this is why, um, this is why, women are not to use authority over a man because, it's out of order. Ecclesiastes, I don't get Ecclesiastes. Because, Eve, she was already in transgressions. Ecclesiastes chapter 25, verse 24, and it reads, Of the woman came the beginning of sin, and through her we all die. Right. So, because because Eve went off, Adam went off, we all die. We all, we all sinned, right? And we all ultimately we all die because sin leads to death. But the multitude of sin leads to death, right? And sin in general leads to death. You don't repent. Now she gave me of the treat, and I did eat. Right? She gave Adam the philosophies of the other nation, and he, decided to take part in it. Right? For better words. Genesis 3rd chapter verse 13 it reads, And Yahweh shall the Most High said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. So the serpent was subtile, and we go to that word beguiled. Word beguiled, which means to deceive, right? To lead astray mentally, to delude, to seduce. Right. So Eve will seduce. She will lead astray from she'll lead astray, right? She'll lead into the other nations, right? She will lead astray, right? She was deceived. She was beguiled by the serpent, by Esau, cunningness. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, and it reads, But I fear lest by any means as the serpent begat Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Hamashiach. All right. Again, the serpent is not talking about a snake. The serpent talking about Esau, who was brown skinned, and he begot Eve through his subtlety, right? And I'm gonna go to that word subtlety. Subtlety. Subtlety, craftiness, cunning, right? A suspicious or false wisdom, right? False wisdom. Esau gave, you know, Eve false wisdom that, that Pearl told her that, if you come live like these people, you'll be a goddess, right? Basically, you'll be a goddess. Prudence, right? Trickery, right? So, you know, and this is why our women are in the mindset they're in right now. They want to be like, they want to be goddess, right? They want to be like the man, right? Um, they want to be, they want to be the queen. Like this is a queendom that we're in. We're in a queendom, right? We have women that are in power and leadership. We have women that are in the government seat. Women that are in, they're it's all out of order. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 14, it reads, in YAHWAH, the Most High said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, that are cursed above all cattle. Right. So the Esau, the so-called white man, he will curse above all cattle. Isaiah chapter 4, verse 5, and it reads, let me get that precept to go back. Isaiah chapter 4, verse 5. Isaiah chapter 34, verse 5, and read, for my sword should be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Adumia and upon the people of my curses to judgment. Right. So the sword that was bathed in heaven represents the ICBMs, right? The missiles, and it should become, and it shall come down upon Adumia. Adumia is a great name, which means Edom, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. So the Edomites, they were cursed. Esau, he's cursed, right? And you get that in Job too. Job, book of Job, 31 chapter, verse 8, 31 chapter, 30 chapter, verse. Be now that they are younger than I have me in derision, whose father I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. Right. And agreed. And above every beast of the field, upon the belly shall thy go, and dust shall thy eat all the days of their life, which represent Edom. They will be in confusion for all the days of their life, right? They will not know good, right? and they would not know how to do good, right? That would be in complete. That would be in confusion. Um, and the younger, can represent. Bear with me, fucking. The younger than Albert can represent the Edomites that are younger than the Israelites, right? Um, because even though, you know, technically, the Edomite, the Edomites are younger than Israelite because the um the the Israelite they were living before the Edomites, right? In derision, which means to mock, right? What's that word derision means? This goes back to mocking. Derision, to laugh, to play, to mock, right? To make sport, right? To to mock, right? And whose father I would have disdain to have set with the dogs of my flock, right? To represent for the risk that I might have sex with the dog. So, what nation of people is known for sleeping with dogs or other animals, which just represent bestiality? So, the Edomites, they are prone to bestiality, right? They do weird things with dogs, right? With other animals too, and they're disgusting creatures, right? Disgusting human beings, right? Continue reading Job 30 chapter verse 2. Yeah, whereunto might the strength of the hand profit me, and womb old age will perish. Third chapter, the third verse, for won't and famine they were solitary and flee into the wilderness, in former time desolate and waste. Right. So the dark nations, the Israelites, um, the dark nation, they got together to force out the Edomites, right? Continue reading the verse 4. Who cut up meadows by the bushes and juniper roots for their meat? Ugh. The meadows, they eat that raw stuff, right? They eat that meat, that raw meat. Verse 5, and it reads, they were driven forth from among men. They cried after them as after a thief, right? Because the Edomites are thieves, right? The Edomites, they were driven forth from among men in the ancient world in the beginning of dark ages by Septimus the Servius and Per and Pescnes Niger around 193 AD, right? So they were driven out, right? They were driven into the Caucasus Mountains, right? Which is where they get their name from, Caucasian. Chapter 30, verse 6, and read to dwell in the cliffs of the valleys and caves of the earth and the rocks, right? They are known as cave beasts, right? And the Caucasians went for the Caucasian mountains, right? The Caucasus mountains, right? Which where they which is where the word Caucasian comes from. The seventh verse reads, among the bushes they brayed under the nettles they were gathered together, right? So they were brayed the harsh cry of a donkey or moor or a sound voice or laugh or loud, resembling a bray. Right. And continue reading into chapter verse 8, and it reads, they were children of fools, yeah, children of base men. They were valor than the earth. So Esau, Edomite, they're base men, right? They're a base. All right, I'm gonna get Isaiah chapter 26, verse 10. And that when the Israelites were also going back into, they were taking over all of Europe. Let favor be showed to the wicked, yet will he not learn righteousness in the land of the land of the land of upright righteousness will he deal wisely, and will not behold the message of the it's so let me read that over again. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 26, verse 10. It reads, let favor be shown to the wicked, yet will he not learn righteousness? In the land of uprightness will he dwell unjustly, and he will not behold the majesty of, YAHWASHI. Right. So the land of uprightness is Israel, right? And you can see that the Amalekites that proclaim themselves to be, the so-called the Israel, the real Jews, right? They deal unjustly, right? They Israel today, the land of Israel is, it was a paradise, but right now is, in all types, is in a, is in a wicked state. All right, 1 hour and 8, so we're, this is gonna be the part one. This is gonna be part one, going to Genesis, the third chapter. Part one of Genesis, going to the third chapter. I hope you were edifying. Lord will that I'll be able to do a part two, but this is part one. All right. So I'm gonna give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shah. Until next time, I want to say Shalom.